Real Lana. Hello, everybody. It will take a few moments to share to Facebook, but hi, Dolores. So glad you're here. Of course, Lisa's here with me, and Lana is here. It's very, very nice to see you, Lana. Thank you for coming. And I don't see any people from Facebook yet. Or maybe they'll come when they know this is on. So let me get to my Facebook page. There we go. I saw you standing alone. Bonnie will undoubtedly tell me not to sing.
I was going to say something, but then I thought, let him go.
That's great.
You can go 1 extra hour tonight. Oh, you mean because it's time to change? It's time to go back.
Yes, it is.
Time to go back, yes. Oh, this is most annoying. I was trying to share and I keep getting messages. So let me make sure this is shared, publicly shared. No. Hate the way Facebook works. It is most annoying.
Yeah, I think I told you this. I really do not like Facebook. I don't go out there.
Yes, but we still have to share to Facebook.
I know. I could be doing so much more, and I've got what's going on.
Of course, we're fortunate because Dolores is sharing to Twitter for us. Probably Lana is sharing to Twitter for us also. So those are saving us work.
Okay, Joe, I'm going to share one more photo with you that I've been asked to share with you today.
Okay.
And it's from Pavlana, I guess. It's something that she had written.
Yeah, Pavlina, you mean?
Pavlina, sorry.
Yeah, Pavlina Chernyeva. Hope I have the accent.
This is referring to the content of, boy, we could do a week's worth of shows on all of this mess between the infrastructure bill, the Build Back Better bill, touching on the salt cap. That's a show in itself.
It's a show on itself, but the only problem is the main point now is that this system is not working for us. We can see that in the form of these bills that were passed. They're planning on closing up shop when it comes to legislation after the passage of the BBBA, if they should get that through.
After the passage of the Build Back Better, the People's Bill, if they can get it through, they're going to close up shop, you said?
They're going to close up shop because nobody likes to do legislation in the second year of a congressional session.
Because they're all running.
Because they're all running, the incumbents are all running, so they don't want to do any work. The only exception is going to be that they're going to devote some time to try to pass the Voting Rights Act. They're still going to fight about that. I think probably for the rest of this year. But they may even stop fighting over that when it's January because they think they've got a problem with people suing, saying they don't have enough time to adjust the changes in the Voting Rights Act and then have that go up to the Supreme Court and have the Supreme Court agree with the people suing. And so they're very leery about trying to pass the voting rights bill after the end of this year. Now, we're already very, very close to the end of this year. It's November 15th already. Thanksgiving and Christmas are coming. They have very little time then to work on the Voting Rights Act and also pass the BBBA. Though if they're true to their word, and of course I don't trust them as far as I can throw them, but if they're true to their word, they'll pass the BBBA Act out of the House this coming week. Then it may go up to the Senate, but there's absolutely no way that Manchin and Sinema are just going to pass it through. I think they're going to continue to bargain and strip more and more and more out of that bill to please their donors. So
let's back up for a second. The CPC caves. So what's next, right?
CPC caved. And what's next? That is title.
That I don't think that most people were aware that they were doing this last night. As a matter of fact,
oh yes, I wasn't even sure that they were doing it while they were doing it.
I know, neither was I.
I thought they were going to need another vote to vote specifically on the amended bill once they amended it. But evidently they don't have to do that because that bill was already passed back in August. That was the nifty thing in what Nancy Pelosi did. She took a bill that was already passed and she amended that bill. As long as everybody concurs in the amendment, or a majority occurs in the amendment, I shouldn't say a majority. I guess they needed. Did they need 60 people for that one? Oh no, this is the House. So
they didn't. They just
for that one. They only needed a majority because it's in the House.
Right.
And they had the majority, 228 to 206.
But they called for that vote, quote unquote, which doesn't. If you go to look up the vote on the infrastructure bill, what you're not going to find it because it was a vote on an amendment to be adopted. And I was watching this in real time and Joe and I were texting back and forth and I'm like, Joe, what's going on here? And, we watched, they called for that vote. There were, I think, 22 or 23 Democratic holdouts, and they held that vote open for hours while the Democrats were called back in. They were left for recess and they didn't come back for like a good hour and a half, maybe longer. And I'm like, Joe, what are they doing? And you must
right. And we think what they did in the hour and a half was they got a harangue from Nancy Pelosi.
Yes,
they got all the reasons why they should go ahead and lose their leverage by passing that bill.
And then Joe Biden came in and gave a speech and gave them, quote unquote, assurances, which weren't assurances, Joe.
Oh, yes. I'm not sure that Joe Biden was there last night.
They said he was. Maybe he was there remotely or whatever, but he talked to them. And, they basically what they did was decouple the promise.
They decoupled the two bills.
These things were going to move together.
By passing the infrastructure bill, they decoupled the two bills. They weren't supposed to pass the infrastructure bill until the Senate passed the BBBA.
So we don't even have that leverage anymore.
We don't have that leverage anymore. The last line of defense, we started out with having Biden guaranteed the coupling. Schumer guaranteed the coupling. Nancy Pelosi guaranteed the coupling. And the Congressional Progressive Caucus guaranteed the coupling. The first person to mess with that, of course, was Joe Biden. Second person was Schumer. The third person, actually back at the end of the summer, was Nancy Pelosi. Okay, so it was up to the CPC to hold the line. They held the line for some time, but you have to understand there are 90 people in the CPC. They shouldn't all be in the CPC because people like Hakeem Jeffries, who's in the leadership group, and Catherine Clark, who's also in the leadership group, the assistant the speaker, are members of the CPC. Those people should not be members of the CPC.
Do we have any idea what the qualifications are to be in the CPC? Does it have to be some sort of a voting record?
No, the qualifications for the CPC have always been, if you want to join the CPC, you can join the CPC. Now, that may have changed with the reorganization under Jayapal. There may be slightly more restrictive requirements now, but they did not apply to the original members of the CPC. Now, some left as a result of the reorganization, but as of last week, I believe there still were 90 members of the CPC. At least 40 of those weren't really progressives.
Okay,
so there were 50 of them who you might say, speaking charitably, you might say, okay, they're progressives. However, by Friday afternoon, according to a Common Dreams story, there were roughly 20 progressives, perhaps a little more, still left. When they polled them, they said they would vote against the infrastructure bill if the infrastructure bill was put up for a vote. So what did Nancy Pelosi do? She didn't put the infrastructure bill up for a vote. She put an amendment to a previous bill she passed up for a vote. Okay.
And replace the text. The amendment was to replace the old text with the
Senate bill, with the infrastructure bill. But HR 3684, which was a number of that bill, still carries the original name. But HR 3684.
Right.
I'm trying to stop.
Right. So I think what we're getting at here is there's a lot of shenanigans going on. Anybody who was following this knows. I mean, I saw yesterday that there was a clip that came out that said that Biden wanted the bills to move together. I was watching Bad Faith the day before. Actually, I think it was that morning. It was that morning where Ro Khanna was being interviewed. No, it wasn't Bad Faith. It was Katie Halper. Katie Halper interviewed Ro Khanna yesterday morning and asked, she said, what's going on? And Ro said, well, we were supposed to vote on this bill this morning. I don't know when the bill's going to come through. And he said, we are going to get some reassurances before we vote on this bill. So I was glad that I watched it in retrospect because the spin that was out, it was really hard unless you sit on Capitol Hill and you report on this stuff to know exactly where they are. And I say that because I want people to understand from this perspective of someone who spent all day following this yesterday. It's really hard to determine where they're at, and that's on purpose. They put these stories out so people don't know exactly what's going on. It's deliberate, very much on purpose. But obviously they did know, Joe, that they were going to vote on this bill. They knew.
Well, some of them knew. We don't know whether all of them knew. We have to remember Ro Khanna is pretty close to Jayapal. So he may have known things that certain others did not know. So I don't know who, what, knew what, when, and how, but at the time of the vote, all of them had to know that they were voting on the infrastructure bill. That vote to amend H.R. 3684 was a vote to pass the infrastructure bill. The way the results worked out was that every progressive caved,
Except
for the six squad members. AOC, Cori Bush, Presley, Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, and Jamal Bowman.
And just as a coinky dink, Nancy got 6 Republicans to vote yes.
She got more than 6 Republicans. She got.
Oh yeah, that's right. There were more.
She got 228 to 206.
No.
So she made up for the 6 Democrats who voted no. Okay, and then she added, let's see, 6 Democrats who voted no. How many Democrats were there to begin with? 223. So 6 Democrats voted no. I believe she got 11 Republican votes to cross over.
Right. So I guess what I'm trying to point out
of the Democratic votes.
I think what I'm trying to point out here is that the power structure as it is stacked against the people. And it was really difficult after watching that yesterday, all day. I took all day into the what? It was 1 o'clock in the morning. Maybe it wasn't quite that late.
Yeah, it was 1 o'clock in the morning. I was up too.
To get to a point where they were holding up the vote and then hearing that everybody on the Hill was pretty frustrated and angry. I've never seen them leave a vote open that long, Joe, ever. In all the time I've ever been watching votes taken. Never.
Right. So Shane says that he has sent you a text message. He would like you to check your text messages because he says he sent you something that...
I sent it to you. It's in your Twitter DM. It's the one from Pavlina.
Oh, I see. That was the one from Shane.
Yes.
Okay, let's see.
He's talking about the bill. She's talking about the bill.
There's going to be a stretch to replace the nation's lead water pipes for Biden's proposed $45 billion bill. This bill only provides $15 billion and doesn't mandate that it all go to replacing lead water pipes. Is that the message?
Yeah, that's the one he sent.
$5 billion for broadband deployment will continue to funnel money into the waiting months of incumbent cable and into the waiting mouths of incumbent cable and wireless providers without requiring high speeds or more competition. It will likely run into similar resistance to a truly equitable build-out. The transportation split favors highways at a time when human-caused climate change is now seen as irreversible, thanks in part to decades of the same bias in favor of cars. 1/3 of the rail funding is subject to future appropriations and therefore might not even happen. Too much goes to repairs rather than new services. The $20 billion for reconnecting historically severed minority communities remained whittled down to a trivial $1 billion.
For the whole country.
Presumably, so the White House could still include it in lists about the top programs you don't know about in the bill. So, yeah, that's a critique of that bill. We have always known it's a bad bill. We have always known it's a bill, half of which goes to donor interests. It was passed to feather the nests of the donors to make them richer.
I would love to go through that bill and come back and do a show just on the bill itself.
There are pretty good analyses of the bill at the American Prospect.
We could
They've
do
been
that
doing
too.
analyses of that bill for months. So we can just, find those analyses and talk about them. But before we go into
All that.
all those details, which are certainly very interesting, but I'm not sure how relevant they are anymore. Because when you look at the whole history of what has happened since March 15th, when they turned to try to pass bills that would be good for people and would be good for families, and that would have an infrastructure component as well, what we see is donors essentially negotiating down, donor representatives, crony capitalist representatives,
Corporate agents.
corporate agents, totally corrupt individuals who have gotten rich themselves on their time in Congress, and in the case of Kirsten Sinema, who's getting rich right now based on her brief time in Congress. All we've seen is those people making demands, and Biden and Schumer and Pelosi caving to those demands, and the progressives standing still for the caving. Now, they may have recently been holding the line at 1.75 trillion, but they didn't hold the line at 6.5 trillion. They didn't hold the line at 6 trillion. They didn't hold the line at 3.5 trillion. I mean, these people we helped to elect would not say no. They were not ready to walk away from the table.
Well, not enough of them. Not enough of them. I think this all comes back to the same problem.
It's not even a question of not enough of them. Even the squad was not willing to say, well, maybe one of the squad was, but specifically Rashida.
Right.
When the $3.5 trillion figure was breached, none of them, except for Rashida, said immediately, I am not voting for this bill if it's less than 3.5 trillion. She was ready to walk away from the bill and walk away from both bills. The others were kind of hemming and hawing a bit. And Jayapal was leading the way to capitulation.
Yes.
All through this time, hinting at it, but doing various things to bring people along, acting in concert, with Nancy Pelosi to reduce things as much as possible.
Yeah, she was the one that signaled to our revolution to ask their congressional liaisons to write letters to their representatives and ask specifically that they left out any dollar figures, but to specifically ask that everything be included. This was a month ago already.
They were setting the stage to cut down on the dollar amounts and to cover that by keeping the various categories of things inside of the bill, but cutting the heart out of those things. The way this bill ended, first of all, the way it started was the very inadequate idea that instead of Medicare for all, we would have expansion of Medicare to cover people 60 and over, and also to include dental, vision, and hearing. By the time they were all through compromising what exists in the BBB Act, at this point, is that people on Medicare, people over 65, will get hearing coverage.
About you.
Yeah, I'm not even sure of the date. It's just a voucher.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all. That's all that people over 65 are now going to get because they were caving right along. It's not just they caved last night. They were caving and compromising right along. In July, they should have walked away from the table. They should have said, we're not negotiating anymore. We've compromised down to 3.5 trillion. That's our last compromise. You can forget about it. You don't get votes from any of us in the CPC. That's what should have happened. And that's not what happened. We got more and more trimming, more and more, and a final cave from the final 23 people, except for those last 6. So from 17 of the 23 final people, we got a cave between yesterday afternoon and yesterday night when they pushed through that bill. So what should that prove to you? Looking at the whole process from March to the present time and their plans to not do any legislation next year, to not pay any attention once they pass the BBBA, regardless of how much they still cut from it. Because remember, Manchin and Sinema have not committed to the 1.75 yet. So they still may be in the market to make more concessions to them. We might end up with only $1 trillion bill.
Well, what they are, the language was that they're going to go to the CBO and get a score to make sure that it's paid for, which, the CBO is very conservative. They
right.
don't
Okay,
often.
That's a different context, though. Okay, the context of that is that they still had 6 Democrats who didn't want to commit to voting for the BBBA. What does those 6 Democrats say? They said they were worried about the deficit. They were worried that the BBBA wasn't fully paid for. Now, there have been so far something like 5 economic studies of the BBBA. All 5, including the OMB economic study, says it's going to be fully paid for.
Yeah, and those
These
6, I think it's important to point out, Joe, that those 6 are not the squad. Those are the conservative Democrats.
Conservative Dems. Abigail Spanberger, Josh Gottenheimer, Elaine Luria, people like that.
Right. So
they're saying, on the one hand, we're worried about the deficit. We insist this completely be paid for. Oh, guess what, people? They voted for the bill last night, those same 6, knowing that CBO had scored that bill over 10 years at a deficit of $256 billion.
The infrastructure bill. Yeah.
The infrastructure bill. The infrastructure bill was evaluated as involving a deficit over 10 years of $256 billion. Yet, these people who were so worried about the BBB Act having a deficit, not being fully paid for, were perfectly well prepared to vote for a bill that they knew had a $256 billion deficit. So these people are complete hypocrites. What this is about is their donors don't want people to have nice things.
Right.
But they want their donors to have nice things. But the heads of the Democratic Party, the leaders of the Democratic Party, are so very respectful to these 6 people. And what Jayapal said is, well, if it's going to take some more time for CBO to score that, then they can have that time so long as this bill doesn't come to a vote until CBO is finished scoring the BBBA. That's what Jayapal said on the eve of her and the other progressives who were holding out actually voting for the infrastructure bill. On the eve of that afternoon, she made this comment directed at the six holdout Democrats, the right-wing Democrats,
signaling to them that they could vote, or they could
signaling to them that
separate
the progressives were willing to wait for a CBO score so long as those six were willing to wait for the passage of the infrastructure bill.
So I think let's just
And then she completely went back on that very evening. She completely shifted her position that very evening and ended up voting for the infrastructure bill. Okay, so what is the meaning of all this? Lisa, what is the meaning of all this?
We have to primary a list, a very specific list of power structure Democrats, both in the House and the Senate. We have to be willing to vote out the incumbents, but we have to do it in the primary. We have to pay attention to the primary. Because if we upset the power structure, we have a chance.
Okay, that's not what I conclude. And the reason why I don't conclude that is we can beat the people who are at the head of the power structure in the primary. We can knock them off. They're no longer in Congress. But it will still be the case that's what is left of the leadership will be able to select their successors for the major committees. And they will select them from people who are already bought by the donors.
Yeah.
In other words, knocking off those individuals doesn't destroy the basic idea of taking money from the donors. We have to do something. We have to have a movement that is going to neutralize the donors. Okay, my proposal is, it's a really radical proposal, but it's very simple. It's not real political in the sense that it doesn't involve choice of candidates so much, specific candidates. It doesn't involve playing electoral politics and running ads for the candidates that you favor. Okay. What it is you reason that the system in Congress is not working for us. It hasn't been working for a very long time. Selective votes to try to get some people who are progressive in power hasn't worked either. I'm not just talking about the squad here. Remember, Jayapal was supposed to be a progressive.
Right.
Khanna is supposed to be a progressive. Jamie Raskin is supposed to be a progressive. Joe Neguse is supposed to be a progressive. Many of those people in the CPC are supposed to be progressives. They've been running as progressives for years, and we've been voting for them for years because we think they're progressive and they're going to represent us. Nevertheless, when push comes to shove, they all cave. Okay, so what can be done about this? Don't try to make these fine distinctions. Go to the polls in every primary you can in 2022 and vote against the incumbent. If it's an incumbent, vote to defeat that incumbent. If you're a Republican, go to the Republican primaries and defeat the incumbent. If the incumbent survives, then in the general election, vote against the incumbent. Even though you may have to vote for a Democrat, vote against the incumbent. Because what we must do to kill this system What we have to do is a clean sweep of Congress. A clean sweep of Congress so that all the people who have been taking money are gone, because we need them to be gone. We need their rules to be gone. We need their system to be gone. And we can have that happen if we can defeat 250 to 300 of them in the House next year. We can get that done. If we can defeat 1/3 of the Senate, people will be so frightened up there that we'll be able to introduce changes we need to make those two bodies work in a different way. Now, this is simple for people to do. This is a movement kind of thing. You have to spread the idea that everybody is to vote against the incumbent, no matter how well you like the incumbent, no matter what you think of the incumbent, because it's not about these individuals. It's about cleaning house. It's about disrupting the system. It's about destroying the system. Now, some people will say, oh, this is electoral politics. We don't want to play electoral politics. We don't want to have any trust in electoral politics. I certainly understand that. I'm very sympathetic to it. But we're not talking about electoral politics here.
We're just talking about when you go to the polls, but you got to go. I mean, Joe, what's going to happen is even if we were to make this happen, right, which it seems like we could, we've got enough time, right? We've got a year to socialize this idea. And we could do that. I'm sure we could possibly do that. The donors are going to come in and they're going to buy off the new congressman anyway.
They'll
right?
try. However, to complete the idea, okay, we're voting to clean house. We're voting to destroy the rules. We're voting to destroy the system. We're not actually voting for the replacements.
We're just voting to get them out and send a message.
Get them out and send a message. One part of that message is to the new people coming in who win office as a result of what we've done. And the message to them is, hey, see what we've just done? We can do that to you too next time if you don't serve us, if you take money from the donors, if you refuse to prioritize our priorities, if you look at the polls and you see what we want and you vote against what we want, we can do to you what we just did to them. And not only can we do it to you, we will do it to you. You saw what we did to them. You saw what we did to Nancy Pelosi. You saw what we did to McGovern. You saw what we did to Steny Hoyer. You saw what we did to Clyburn. You saw what we did to every one of these people. If you don't serve us, we're going to do that to you. So you be careful about taking any donor money, because if we see you take donor money and then vote for the donor interests, we're going to do that to you. That's also a message that we'll be sending by doing it to the people who they are now. That's important to realize. Now, some other people will say, look, this is still electoral politics. No, it's not completely electoral politics. I'm not saying you do
We're
this.
not asking anybody to go knock doors or campaign. You need to be aware that you've got to get to the polls.
Right. But what we're also saying is this. We're also saying that this is a fighting on all fronts strategy. That is, there are many of our compatriots on the left, in the alternative media, who are now saying, don't do electoral politics. Let's have general strikes. Let's have protests every week, every 2 weeks, continuing protests. Let's get 10 million people to D.C. Let's build up big mutual aid funds. Let's have continual strikes. Okay, and you know what I say to that? Yeah, let's do all of that. Because if we do all of that and we support all of that, including the Red Berets movement for Medicare for All, got to put in a little commercial there.
Right.
If we keep doing those things and we keep activating the population, the voting population, that also activates our ask, which is when you get to 2022, the demonstration, the protest on that date in November of 2022, that protest will be to get rid of every incumbent you possibly can in the House and the Senate. In other words, in a sense, that bit of electoralism is going to be the ultimate protest, because it's going to be a peaceful revolution that throws them all out. That can be the combination of all these other revolutionary acts.
Correct.
Remember, one thing our founders did is that they put into our Constitution the means of bloodlessly getting rid of tyrants through voting, so that we all don't have to shoot up each other in the streets. That's why they did that. They recognized that was a better way of doing things than killing everybody in sight. It is a better way of doing things, but we've got to use that way of doing things. And now, the best way to try to do things in that way is wholesale electoral murder of the incumbents. That is what we're proposing here. I'm going to give you a chance because I've gone.
No. I mean, it makes a lot of sense, Joe, because we've got a year. We have a year to get the message out. You're not working for us. You're gone. It's, and for the voters, for the activists, for us that are going to be working with communities on every issue that we are working on, be it climate, criminal justice reform, campaign finance reform, healthcare, whatever it is. And we know there's too many to gosh darn name, right? But if we get this word out that the 2022 primary is that we do not vote for any incumbent. Why? Because
2022, not just the 2022 primary.
2024.
Not just the 2022 primary, but the 2022 general elections also.
Right. Everything, right?
Both of those will be about
3 years.
Getting rid of the incumbents.
Okay, stop interrupting now, Joe. You're making me nuts. You gotta let me finish my thought.
I'm sorry.
If we can get the message right to everyone that we've got to send the message to Capitol Hill that they're not working for us, and we don't care how much anybody is loved, they're gone.
Yes, and the reason why they all have to be gone is because no matter how well we think of them, they have all acquiesced in this particular system.
Right.
They all decided to play the game. That's why they're in trouble right now. That's why they're in the trouble they're in. This lousy result came from them trying to negotiate in the way that Nancy Pelosi and the other leaders wanted them to negotiate.
Oh, and
they wanted them to play this old game. We didn't elect them to play this old game. We elected them to fight. And practically none of them have been fighting right along. They've been negotiating. They've been framing things in a better way.
But they're not negotiating on the behalf of any of us.
No.
That's the bottom line. It's so corrupt at this point that we do not have representation. And anybody who has ever followed me on Twitter knows I don't even play the Democrat-Republican game anymore. As far as I'm concerned, they're all in reversible practice jerseys. They're corporate agency. It is literally corporate law. They are agents of the corporations. They are up there. They are, taking money hand over fist. They are negotiating for these lobbyists. They let the lobbyists in the room and they write the damn bills now.
Yeah,
It
the
is
lobbyists
that
write the
corrupt.
bills. They've been doing that for a long time. It was the
On
lobbyists
everything
who
now.
wrote the Affordable Care Act
Right.
way back then.
And there's really, it's important that we send the message. You're not working for us. You're gone. And
Right.
we do it in the primaries. In the primaries. You
In
go,
the primary,
you vote.
we do that. It's most important to do it in the primary because that's where the incumbents are most vulnerable. But if you can't do it in the primary, you got to do it in the general. The most important thing is to fulfill the idea. If you don't work for us, you're gone.
And you know what? This will really empower those independent runs. If we can get this out, I mean, it could be the year of the independent.
It could be the year of the independent. It could be the year of the Green Party.
And the year of the Greens too. Absolutely.
We're not trying specifically to do anything for the Green Party, but
why not? But if they get on the ballot,
that's not our objective. This is not about parties.
Right. It's not
about individual candidates. It's about disrupting the system that exists now. Throwing the people out who are receiving the money and doing the bidding of their donors, making getting the money a disadvantage for getting elected. It's so important that you understand just that particular point. If people begin to understand that the money they're collecting ensures their doom at the polls,
right.
That's how we'll get that money out of politics.
Right. And we can do it in state houses too. Right.
And we can do it in state houses too. And we should do it in state houses too. We should do it at every level. Vote against the incumbents. That's so important. So important.
And there are, and I'll be the first one to say this, there are state politicians here in the House that I don't want to have voted out, right? However, there are also politicians here, and I'm in a closed primary state, so I'm going to be honest with you. I'll switch parties so that I can vote in the Republican Party just for this endeavor, okay? Those of you that are in open primary states, God love you. I wish I was. But in my state, if I want to vote out an incumbent in the Republican Party, I got to switch parties. And I'll do that. I will literally do that. Okay, because my reps here, the biggest threat here would be the other side of the aisle for me. That's the hard part. However, if I get some independents on the ballot that are worth me sticking in this party that I'm in, because I don't even have a choice here. There is no independent party here. You're no party preference. If you're an independent, registered independent, or you're not even a registered independent, you're no party preference. You don't get to vote in a primary. That's how bad it is here. That itself is voter suppression, right?
Yes, absolutely.
But if we can get the message out that we are unseating incumbents because they're taking special interest money and they're not working for the people, and we actually upset the apple cart, Joe's right. It will make a difference. And you don't have to go knocking on doors. You don't have to donate to anybody. If you want to, great. But if you don't want to, even better. All you got to do is go to the polls and vote in that primary, and go to the polls and vote or register for your ballot. Doesn't matter. But I'm just begging people. You have to vote. You've got to go vote. Vote them out.
Vote them out. Absolutely. Now, it's important to emphasize also something I said earlier that I want to emphasize again. It's important that people who are part of this movement also support, okay, the non-electoral protests that are going on, the
Oh,
protests for
yeah.
Assange, okay, the protests of Pfizer, okay, the protests before Medicare for All, the protests on the issues, because the protests on the issues highlight continuously that the representatives who are in office now are not doing anything for us. And so they are, in the end, very supportive, okay, of our effort. And what we're doing is very supportive, okay, of their effort. The key idea here is that our protest at the polls, our demonstration at the polls, is another demonstration against the system. And it has that in common with all the other demonstrations and protests against the system, all the other attempts to go into the streets. It's
All
of
of
a
it.
piece with those. It's just fighting on another front, this time on the electoral front. So it's fighting on all fronts. It's still hashtag FOAF. I want to emphasize that. The other thing, okay, that I want to emphasize, which keeps on slipping around in my mind for some reason, okay, but which is very important, is that it'll come back to me. It's
Oh, no,
constantly
get it
coming.
back. Get it back. I hate when I do that.
When they do that, right? Going in and out. It's an important
Okay,
idea.
well, you keep thinking. I just want to reiterate something that we said the other day. Every activist that is out there protesting something, every cause, be it Don Ziegler, be it Assange, Medicare for All, climate justice, criminal justice, or oh my gosh, oh my goodness, prison industrial complex, the military industrial complex, you name it, all of them. We need to support each other. We need to build that network. If Assange protests are going on and the Medicare for All protesters don't have anything going on, get in the streets. This is about all of it. It's all caused by the same things. There is no reason why activists should not support one another. None. And I know there's a lot of initiatives going on. People want to do general strikes and all of that. And we can. And everybody can't do everything. But when it comes to a protest and people being in the streets, open up your minds and think about, hey, you know what? There's an anti-war protest downtown. I'm not doing anything this afternoon. I'm going to put my red beret on and I'm going to go. Because while you're down there with those activists, you meet them, you network, you grow your network. Just like in Europe, people get out in droves. Why? Because they've been doing this for a lot longer than we have. And they understand that
Yep.
it takes millions of people in the streets. America hasn't gotten there yet. And we all know that we don't have the luxury of getting in the streets. We have no social safety net. However, sometimes after work on a Friday afternoon, it works, right? Once you start intermingling with your fellow activists and meeting people in your community, it will embolden you, I promise. And we have to stop thinking that, well, the Assange protests are over here and we're doing Medicare for All. We need all kinds of people to realize that this is all the same stuff. If they bring Assange back successfully, our First Amendment rights are gone, let alone press freedoms.
Right.
I mean, we're done, because if they go after that, they're going to go after everything.
Right. Which brings me back to two more points, okay, that I wanted to make. The first point is they are going to spend next year, the whole of next year till November, campaigning, doing nothing but their politics for their own selves and doing nothing for us, being afraid to put a bill on the table. We have to make it known very early on at the start of this movement that we will consider that kind of behavior an offense. We expect them to be in Washington legislating for us. And if they are not doing that, if they're spending too much time on their primaries, if they're spending too much effort on their campaigns, and if they're not there to vote, and if they're not there to work on legislation instead, that we're going to notice that, and we're going to be even more motivated to kick those incumbents out.
And protesting a politician on the campaign trail is a beautiful thing.
Right. And
It's a
if
beautiful thing.
you're protesting them on the campaign trail because they're not back in Washington working on legislation for you, that's a beautiful thing. That's a really beautiful thing. And once they get the expectation that we expect to see them back in Washington working there, that's going to be some progress. Then the other
finding out who these politicians are and how much money they're taking from what special interest is another beautiful thing to do while they're on the campaign trail. Hey, why'd you take $575,000 from the fossil fuel companies?
Yep. Are you telling me you took $575,000 from the fossil fuel companies and that's not going to affect your vote? Is that why you're blocking clean energy in your committee spot? Because you took the $575,000 from them? Tag them with that a few times. But to tag them with that, you got to learn about who's giving them money. You have to go to opensecrets.org, and you have to look at the record of who they're receiving donor money from.
It's not hard.
That is not hard.
We can put that up and show people how to do that. It's really not hard. And the people in this room probably know how to do it anyway, but I'm talking to the people who might watch this later on.
Right. And the other thing that should be emphasized as well is that there is a state-based movement for Medicare for All that is now growing hotter, and hotter. We know about this, of course, because of the Washington movement, but now there's a New York movement, and there's a Massachusetts movement, and there are movements in other states too. And over the next year, those will be going forward because we've gotten so frustrated at the federal level. So those are going to be going forward. When they're going forward, you should be supporting those movements too, with demonstrations, and with protests, and with activities of all kind, because that movement fits into the fighting on all fronts strategy as well. And that movement is going to be helped as well if the incumbents blocking single payer at the state level get kicked out at the state level, and new candidates in favor of state level single payer get into office, but get into office with the lesson that just like we threw the incumbents that they beat out, if they don't serve us in the next election, we're going to be throwing them out too.
Yep. And I think it's really important that people start to pay attention to what they say versus what they do, and what they've said versus what they've done. I've got Connor Lamb in February of this year. He did a town hall call. I'm in his district. I get on and I'm listening. And he's he's going to drill, spill, crack, and frack. 100%. Absolutely. Bar none. That's all he was talking about, right? We're going to expand for more drilling, more fracking, open up the cracker plant, which is going to use the gas from the fracking to make plastics exude hundreds of tons of volatile organic chemicals into the air that we breathe here. And he was unabashed about it, right? Now, if you pull up Connor Lamb, who's now running for the senator of Pennsylvania, like his first congressional run. Now he's back to talking about healthcare. Do not let them lie to you. Do not let them lie to you. They do it all the time. You've got to pay attention. Call them out on their lies.
Call them out on their lies and pay attention to their previous records. And when they suddenly start to change, they got to get those tough questions. We know your previous record. We know you did this before. How do we know you're not lying to us right now?
Oh, I wouldn't even be that nice because I know what's going on with mine. You are a liar. Period. The end. That's it.
And that's another one of the reasons why we got to replace them all. Because to some degree or other, they all are liars. Every last one of them.
It's all right to some extent in the old days, the way that they worked, but they are blatantly, openly taking money from their special interests. They are not, 87% of people support the Build Back Better plan. 87%. And yet they still gut it. And when this CBO score comes back, and it's gonna, I hope I'm wrong, but they're gonna come back and say that it's not paid for, and they're gonna gut it some more. They're not working for us.
Right.
And they need to realize that we know it. We need to get in their faces.
Right. If there is a reason, one reason why the Build Back Better Act may come in as not being paid for, it's because they're lifting the constraints on state and local taxes.
Oh, the salt. Yes.
The salt.
Yes, because they're
Tax
that's going to starve the states
because
too.
those conservative Democrats wanted the salt to be gone because it was good for their constituents. That's costing the Treasury a pile. If CBO finds that that bill is in deficit, that's going to be a very important reason why it's in deficit.
Oh my God, I never even thought about that. They shoved it in there and they have no cap on it. Of course it's going to be in a deficit. For God's sake, every state in the country would be.
Well, you see, here's the thing. I don't think the BBBA has been written so as to totally take out the salt deduction yet.
I thought they shoved it back in just the other day.
I thought they shoved it back in with a more reasonable limit. Okay,
yeah, and now they're proposing taking the cap off entirely, from what I've understood.
Right. And so what are they going to do?
Oh, that's my dog. I'm going to mute you for a minute and figure out what he wants.
Okay, sure. So what are they going to do? What I think, they're going to do is whatever comes back from CBO, what they're going to then say is, okay, you can have my vote if you take the salt constraint out of the BBB Act. That's what they're going to do, because that's what they're really interested in. They don't care if there's a deficit on it or not. They were happy to vote for the infrastructure bill, even though CBO had found there was a $256 billion deficit there. So anyway, we've been presenting a pretty radical proposal. So, as she used to say on the Rachel Maddow program, talk me down. If you disagree with us, talk us down. But if you do talk us down, what I want to know is, do you have a better idea? If you think that this idea that we're proposing is too disruptive or too dangerous or too something or other, come up with a better idea. We needed an idea that's going to disrupt this system. Because if it keeps on working the way we saw it work this year, none of our priorities will ever get through in a way that is satisfactory to us. It's so obvious that that's going to be the situation. I mean, look at what they're leaving in this bill. Hardly anything is being left in this bill. Nothing worth talking about is being left in this bill. Do you know that this bill used to have 12 weeks of paid family leave in it? When they got through with it, it had 0 weeks of paid family leave in it. Then some Democrats got really upset. And so then the leadership relented. And they put back 4 weeks of paid family leave. 4 lousy weeks of paid family leave. That's all. That's it. No time to get sick. No time to have an accident when you're giving birth. No time to have to recover for a considerable time and take care of your child too. No time to do any of this. That is what you have to consider. That kind of thing. They stripped out or cut to the bone every good thing that was originally proposed for this bill. And the Democrats, the progressive Democrats, are saying yes to that because they think if they have a little bit of money behind each of the elements of the framework, that money is going to expand in future years because these things are popular. But the truth is, when you don't spend enough money on the individual things for them to have any impact that people notice, then there's nothing there to be popular about. There's nothing there. They don't notice the impact. The money is too little for the public to notice the impact. The money is too there for them to notice that you've been doing a good thing or trying to do a good thing. Putting small amounts of money there in each of the categories is a recipe for failure. It's a recipe for failure because nobody sees you delivering good things. Nobody sees you delivering on your promises. When you promise people paid family leave and they get only 4 weeks of it, they're angry at you for giving them too little. They're not grateful to you for giving them the 4 weeks. That's not how it works. And when increasingly they know, because we have increasing knowledge of MMT going through the population as we speak, Stephanie Kelton estimated 1/3 of the Congress itself knows about MMT now. And we're going to have more and more spread of MMT throughout the population. And you're only giving 4 weeks of paid family leave when everybody knows it's not a matter of money, when everybody knows the money can be spent, knows it's not a matter of money.
Sorry, Joe.
That's all right.
I wanted to make a comment. Sandy Degg is asking for a central place that we can work online to collaborate and whatnot. And I was just going to respond, but I'll just say it here. I could put a Slack together if people are interested. I would just need emails sent to me. And I'll have to figure that out because I've got a ton of emails and I have to figure out which email. But yes, we can do that. If you want, we could form a repository for articles and whatnot. Joe, it just hit me like a ton of bricks when I walked out, when I had to go check on my dog and what was going on with him. I apologize to everybody, but they shoved that salt tax back in that bill. There's no way that bill is going to come back paid for with that salt without a cap on it.
Yeah, they probably know that.
Well, I mean, I can't believe it didn't hit me before now. I am pissed about it because that's exactly why they did it.
Okay, so what I said is I don't think that that sole tax deduction is there with no limits right now. I think what the Democrats just put in this week was what they refer to as a more reasonable limit. I don't think they took all the limits out. I think what this current game is about is that when the number comes back from CBO, the six Democrats are going to say, oh, we can't vote for this.
Well, yeah, that's why they did it.
Well, that may be why somebody did it. Okay, but the people who did it, who put in the more reasonable tax, I think expected to get the six Democrats to come over because the other side was being reasonable and was giving them something.
But that's the problem.
They didn't come over. The reason why they didn't come over is because the Democrats did not give them enough. What they wanted was completely getting rid of the salt, no limit at all. That's what they wanted.
Which would have killed the bill entirely with the CBO, number one. Number two, can we all just get to the same?
It wouldn't have killed the bill with the CBO. CBO doesn't have the power to kill the bill.
Well, the report would come back, which would have resulted in killing the bill. If there's no tax on, if there's no cap on the salt,
not necessarily. But not necessarily. If a majority of Democrats in the House wanted to vote for that bill, they would vote for that bill and they would pass it. It would get out of the House.
But they don't, Joe. That's the problem.
Well,
I think that's why we're talking about this, because we all keep banging our heads thinking, okay, well, maybe this way. Well, maybe this avenue. Well, maybe we could make it work this way. Or maybe we could do this.
Yeah, and we're not really talking about that here tonight. The main point, okay, we're making is that kind of thing is really idle speculation.
Right.
It's the game they want us to play.
Well, and that's the realization that I'm trying to say that I have gotten to at this point.
Yeah.
The Democrats
overriding fact that we are looking at work, and that we have to disrupt it in a radical way so that the rules will be changed, the structures will be changed, the people will be changed, and there will be no more role for money in the system, because taking money will be seen automatically as a betrayal and will make your defeat by the people an automatic defeat by the people.
And we can do this. We can. We've just got to socialize the idea that nobody wants to do electoral politics, and everybody understands why. Now it's just a shot across the bow. You take money, you don't work for the people, you're gone. We're going to make sure of it.
That's right. Okay. So I think that was the main point that we had to make. In other words, that point and the overall proposal, okay, that we're making. We've made those main points. So let's look at the comments so far and see what people are saying.
You want to go through that one article, Joe? The Common Dreams one, or the Counterpunch article, or no?
Actually, I'd rather go through the Common Dreams article because the Common Dreams article, is not as long, but it is very, very plain what was going on there based on the Common Dreams article. So let me share that.
Yeah, put that on your screen.
Okay, let me share that, and we shall see. Okay, there's a great article Lisa was talking about, which is by Michael Hudson, that appeared in Counterpunch. And that gave a terrific analysis of what was going on this week. And that has a broader perspective than the Common Dreams article. Where the Common Dreams article excels is in reporting what was going on just yesterday when they were passing the infrastructure bill. And so they were holding a press conference, in the Capitol. What you're seeing now is the article by Kenny Stansel in Common Dreams. And the headline is "Foolishness, quote unquote. House passes infrastructure bill but postpones the Build Back Better Act." The foolishness is the progressives gave away the leverage to pass the Build Back Better Act. Now, that tacitly assumes, of course, that the leadership was making a mistake, when maybe the leadership actually meant to cut off the leverage of the progressives at the knees. Anyway, the U.S. House on Friday night passed a bipartisan fiscal infrastructure bill, but didn't bring the Build Back Better Act to the floor, sending just one half of President Joe Biden's two-pronged economic agenda to the White House, with only a pledge that conservative House Democrats will vote for the party's broader social infrastructure and climate package at a later date. That wasn't the plan on Friday morning when the day started. Biden and House Speaker Pelosi said they wanted House Democrats to pass both parts of the president's agenda, the Build Back Better Act, which would invest $1.75 trillion over 10 years to strengthen climate action and the welfare state, and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, also known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Framework, or the BIF, a fossil fuel-friendly proposal to upgrade the nation's roads, bridges, and ports that was approved by the U.S. Senate, in August. Due to the intransigence of a few right-wing House Democrats who made last-minute demands for additional fiscal information that could take weeks to obtain, and the acquiescence of Pelosi and Biden, a planned floor vote on BBB was shelved and reduced to a rule for consideration. That was the last vote last night on the rule for consideration, which was approved in a party line vote of 221 to 213. Prior to that, the BIF passed by a tally of 228 to 206, with 13 House Republicans joining most Democrats in supporting the measure. Because it wasn't accompanied by a real vote on BBB, 6 progressives, Jamal Bowman, Cori Bush, AOC, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley, and Rashida Tlaib voted against BIF. Quote, "Passing the infrastructure bill without passing the Build Back Better Act first," Omar said in the statement, "risks leaving behind child care, paid leave, health care, climate action, housing, education, and a roadmap to citizenship." I guess my only comment on that quote is, it doesn't just risk it, it probably guarantees that a good bit of those things that were in the $1.75 trillion bill will be cut out of the final bill. The final bill will probably be left as a shell, so Mr. Biden can say that he passed his BBBA first, so that they can propagandize on that shell that they delivered their promises, which is completely and utterly stupid, because everybody is going to see right through that. If they can't see through it themselves, the Republicans will gleefully point it out when they run against the Democrats in 2022. For months, progressives have stressed, going on with the article now, and Democratic leaders had agreed that keeping both pieces of legislation linked and passing them in tandem was key to securing Biden's entire agenda. Holding a floor vote on BIF and a mere procedural action on BBD, progressives argued Friday, was a betrayal of a two-track strategy that opens the door for right-wing party members who are content with passage of BIF to further weaken Sorry, I scrolled down too much to further weaken or completely abandon the already gutted BBB. We're proud of the squad for being courageous and standing up for what's right tonight, said Varshini Prakash, executive director of the Sunrise Movement. Quote again, it's bullshit that President Biden, Speaker Pelosi, ran through a bill written by a bunch of corporations, but feel fine to hold off on passing Biden's own agenda, a popular bill that would actually combat climate change and help by working people, she said. Now, I just want to call attention to the fact that Varshini Prakash, at the beginning of this whole process, and the Sunrise Movement demanded that a $10 trillion Build Back Better bill be passed. $10 trillion. They're now talking about how courageous the squad was to stand up for a $1.75 trillion bill. What happened to the other more than $8 trillion that the Sunrise Movement wanted? In other words, the Sunrise Movement is bullshit too. It's not really playing the kind of game it should be playing. It's gotten wrapped up in the electoral process.
Well, at least the top down, okay?
At least the top down. That's fair.
The decentralized Sunrise Movement beat the crap out of them too. There was an article about it as well. But you have to remember now, the tops of all of these things are going to get co-opted, like the tops of everything always gets co-opted.
Right. And Prakash has gotten co-opted. Quote, to be clear, quoting from him again, the BIF is not a climate bill, and the stakes of climate crisis are too high to delay reconciliation any longer, or worse, let it die along with our futures, added Prakash. And she was quite right. However, the BIF is a climate bill. It's a bill that's friendly to the fossil fuel companies and the use, of fossil fuels. So it is a climate bill. It's just an anti-climate bill.
It's going the wrong way.
It's about the climate. Mary Small, the National Advocacy Director at the Individual Project, said in a statement that Bowman, Bush, Ocasio-Cortez, Omar, Presley, and Tlaib demonstrated enormous political courage in their continued fight to hold the line for passage of the Build Back Better Act. When they made their votes, they knew that their votes didn't mean anything. They made those votes as negative votes in order to preserve their own image as people who are really progressive. They didn't make their votes because they thought that those votes were going to do anything that was really practical. Because Pelosi had already beaten them soundly by that time. Just had to point that out. Quote, they understand better than anyone what's at stake with this game-changing package of investments in children and families and our climate, Small added, and quote again, their votes showed that unlike the corporate Democrats, dead set, sorry, I did it again, dead set on derailing the heart of President Biden's agenda on behalf of their corporate donors. They know what it means to serve the people they represent. That may be the case. Even though analyses of spending and revenue conducted by the U.S. Treasury Department, the White House, the Joint Committee on Taxation have found that BBB is paid for and may actually reduce deficits, a small group of conservative House Democrats on Friday insisted on seeing an official score from the CBO before they would vote for BBB. Now, here's the point where he should have pointed out that they were perfectly pleased to vote for the infrastructure bill, which got a negative score from the CBO because it had $256 billion worth of deficit, according to CBO's simulations. Given the razor-thin, by the way, CBO is totally unreliable in its simulations. It's all a charade to ask them to do this or do that. They're incompetent. They can't tell what's going to happen in the economy even 6 months out. Okay, when they give you a projection in January or February of what has to happen, they have to revise the projection in June or July because they're off. 5 months out, they're off in their projections. They need another projection.
If you're interested, Katie Halper did an interview yesterday with Ro Khanna, and he literally says that they are lousy economists in the CBO, which is actually really funny. He prefaces it with, I'm probably going to get into a lot of trouble, and then he says there are lousy economists in the CBO.
There are lousy economists. They have an austerity bias. They have the type of bias the Peterson Foundation has. They're overly concerned about the debt, and the deficits. They have not learned that the level of debt and that the debt to GDP ratio are both statistics that are of utterly no importance from an economic or financial point of view. They're only important, but from a political standpoint, because people confuse their households with the federal government. Given the razor-thin margins in Congress, Democrats can afford only 3 defections in the House and none in the Senate to pass the BBB through the filibuster-proof budget reconciliation process. Meanwhile, it could take the CBO weeks to produce a score, and there's no guarantee the holdouts will be satisfied with the results, which are notoriously arbitrary and unreliable, according to experts. Point I just was making. Warren Gunnell says, in a tweet, never forget the CBO director, who's a Republican, estimated a $15 an hour minimum wage would increase the on-budget deficit by nearly $77 billion, while other major economists and academics told us that a $15 an hour minimum wage would substantially reduce the deficit. Not good, said the man with the receipts. And he was actually, quote, tweeting something by Jake Sherman, who said mods and progs are working on a statement together. This statement is aimed at giving assurances to progs that the mods will work for BBB if the CBO score lines up with the White House estimates. This statement will be backed by Biden. We'll see if they can get this done. It's all baloney sausage, folks. It really is. Ironically, the CBO determined earlier this year the $550 billion BIF adds $256 billion to the deficit. BIF supporters' lack of concern about such a finding prompted critics to suggest that Friday's request for a CBO score by several right-wing House Democrats, including Representatives Ed Case, Hawaii, Jared Golden, Maine, Stephanie Murphy, Florida, Kathleen Rice of New York. By the way, she was one of the villains of the TPP struggle. Kurt Schrader of Oregon and Abigail Spanberger, Virginia, the old CIA lady, was nothing more than a thinly veiled attempt to tank the more ambitious portion of Biden's agenda. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez welcomed to, quote, who's a deficit hawk anyway, unquote, where the debt concerns are made up and the CBO scores don't matter. And that was a quote tweet of Sahil Kapoor saying, the peculiar situation Dem leaders now face, some of the same holdouts demanding a CBO score showing Build Back Better is fully paid for, are also strong supporters of the infrastructure bill, which CBO says is not paid for and adds $256 billion to the debt. Although those lawmakers' constituents support BBB by large margins, powerful corporate interests opposed to the legislation have carried out a massive lobbying blitz against the bill's key provisions and showered obstructionist politicians with cash. Following the CBO curveball, Pelosi proposed bringing BIF to the floor for a vote and passing a rule to set up a future vote on BBB. The Congressional Progressive Caucus, CPC, originally rejected this plan, which deviated from the Democratic Party's well-established strategy of enacting the 2 bills simultaneously. CPC Chair Pramila Jayapal said in a Friday afternoon statement that if our 6 colleagues still want to wait for a CBO score, we would agree to give them that time, after which point we can vote on both bills together, unquote. Roughly 20 CPC members reportedly told Jayapal during a closed meeting on Friday afternoon that they would vote against BIF if it was decoupled from BBB, according to Manu Raju, chief congressional correspondent at CNN. The progressives were left wondering, quote, why is Pelosi putting the infrastructure bill on the floor and daring them to vote against it when there are 20 or so who won't support it tonight? Why not put Build Back Better on the floor and dare six moderates to vote against it? Over the course of several hours, conservative House Democrats, led by Representative Josh Gottheimer, and the CPC, led by Jayapal, worked out a deal at the behest, of Biden. That was, there's a tweet by Sahil Kapoor, Progressive Caucus Evolution. One, Senate must pass Build Back Better before House votes on infrastructure bill. 2, House must pass Build Back Better before House votes on infrastructure bill. 3, House may pass infrastructure after centrists say they will support Build Back Better. So those were the 3 dimensions of the cave constructed by the Democrats and implemented by the Democrats. CPC member Jared Huffman, Democrat of California, told The Hill Biden was urging progressives to vote for BIF, as well as the rule for consideration of BBB, quote, subject to some assurances and commitments that he was working to get. These assurances and commitments came in the form of a statement from Case, Gottheimer, Murphy, Rice, and Schrader, which said, we commit to voting for the Build Back Better Act in its current form, other than technical changes, as expeditiously as we receive fiscal information from the Congressional Budget Office, but in no event later than the week of November 15th, consistent with the top lines for revenues and investments that projected by the White House. The Intercepts by Ryan Grimm argued that while, quote, the focus is on the progressives, the focus, is on the progressives, the few conservative lawmakers preventing both bills from passing on Friday were, quote, doing it right in the open, unquote, calling the corporate Democrat statement, quote, foolishness, unquote. Former Ohio State Senator Nina Turner said if they are committed to voting for BBB, quote, no later than November 15th, they can do it now, unquote. If the corporatist Dems can vote on BBB no later than November 15th, they can do it now. The people who have the greatest needs are always placed on the back burner. This is foolishness. Oh, by the way, if you go with our proposal to vote out all of the incumbents, then most probably in her district, you'd be voting in Nina Turner because she won't be the incumbent.
Oh, that's right. She won't be.
Shontel Brown is going to be the incumbent.
Yeah.
Other critics also raised questions about conservative Democrats' endgame. Quote, a statement of support for BBB that is contingent on the CBO score could be more of an escape hatch than a commitment to vote for BBB, warned Adam Gentleson, a former congressional staffer and current executive director of the Battleborn Collective, a progressive communications firm. Adam Gentleson tweeted, buyer beware, a statement of support for BBB contingent on CBO score could be more of an escape hatch, but that's just a repeat of what I just said, so I'll skip that. While progressives are being told to trust the obstructionists who have promised to vote for BBB when the CBO score comes in and says what everybody says it will say, unquote, Grimm noted he questioned why those conservative Democrats are refusing to accept reputable budget estimates already provided by the White House and others. And he said that the progressives' lack of trust in these few holdouts, he added, quote, flows from the complete illogic of their public position, which raises questions about their actual position, unquote. Biden, for his part, said in a statement that he is confident that during the week of November 15th, the House will pass the Build Back Better Act. So the timeline promised, in other words, it's already the 6th of November. The timeline promised is within the next 2 weeks. That still leaves the Senate, with the Democratic Party's two biggest obstacles to social investments, right-wing senators Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema waiting with less incentives to support BBB now that BIF has been approved. Yeah, they got their BIF. That's what they want. That's what they were waiting for. They have no incentive at all to support the BBB. And they're going to be about cutting more and more and more out of the BBB and leaving Biden with just a shell to talk about. In a statement, Tlaib warned that passing BIF gives up our leverage to get Build Back Better through the House and Senate, and I fear that we are missing our once-in-a-generation opportunity to invest in the American people. Well, I don't agree that it's a once-in-a-generation opportunity. Not if we execute our movement to kick all the incumbents out. If we do that, we're going to have plenty of opportunities to invest in the American people going forward. That's what destroying the system that exists in the Senate and the House now is about. It's about getting those opportunities back by making the new people who are elected to Congress responsive to us and frightened of us at the same time because of the slaughter we created, the electoral slaughter, I want to emphasize, we created with respect to their predecessors. So there's some more sarcasm here. I don't know if there's anything else really worth saying in here, but I'm sure you're getting the picture quite clear. Oh, there was something just ahead of the vote. Ezra Levin, co-founder and co-executive director, of Indivisible, suggested that Democrats, quote, include a deeming resolution in which they vote for the BIF, but hold it at Pelosi's desk until the House passes the BBB. But such language was not introduced. And progressives again negotiated in good faith and again reiterated their commitment to passing the BIF alongside the BBB, said Indivisible. The reason we're not celebrating a major victory tonight sits squarely with the conservative Democrats who sabotage progress at every turn. They reminded us they work for their corporate donors and not the people they represent. We won't soon forget. And again, that's why we want to get rid of all the incumbents, because we want to get rid of all the people who work for their donors. Okay, more. I guess that really does it. That's it in terms of the significant things from that article. Pretty good article. Okay, it's worth reading. Goes through all the machinations. It basically tells you what happened. It just doesn't have any inside information concerning what happened to the progressives in that period of recess that stretched from 15 minutes to an hour and a half before the vote on HR, is it 3684 or I think it's 3684.
I think that's what it is.
Yeah. Okay, so now shall we take comments and questions? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go. I'm going to pass on some of the ones that don't make the substantive points. Okay, so Elvira points out AOC did a stream earlier about her vote. It's on YouTube. So, of course, she's going to paint herself, okay, in a good light and expect to be congratulated for her negative vote, which I suppose we should do. And Michelle de Villiers says, nobody likes to fail in front of an election. And Teresa Sanders, so we're fuckered up. I guess that was a substantive point. And Elvira Mihalko says there were 6 moderate Democrats who all of a sudden want their CBO score. AOC was saying today on her video they didn't pay any attention to the CBO score that said that there was a $256 billion deficit in the bill they wanted to pass. And Michelle de Villiers says Jayapal needs to be protested immediately. Absolutely, she needs to be protested immediately. Go to a Washington office. Put 1,000 or 2,000 people up there. That will give her something to think about. Kay Ryan says, hi, all glad to see you. Lana says, apparently Biden called the Jayapal's mother. And she was squealing with joy. La-ti-da. What was she squealing with joy about? Was she squealing with joy because she's going to get some hearing coverage? Is that what she was squealing with joy about? I don't know.
I don't know where Pamila's mom lives. Is she here in the States?
I don't know. That's
Yeah,
interesting.
I'm not sure.
I don't know whether she's here in the States or not. Lana says, Shane told me AOC and Jamal voted yes. No, they didn't vote yes. They voted yes on the BBB Act, but they voted nay on the infrastructure bill. Kay says, the squad threw Pegosi out of their cave. Laugh out loud. I don't think that was the squad. Kay, I think that was the CPC. They threw Pelosi out of their cave. Then they voted along with her anyway. And Carmen says, I'm surprised Presley held strong. Well, I guess they had to try to represent that the squad was good for something. And Shane said, Lisa, check your text messages. Well, we went through that before. And Sandy says, shared. Let's go through. It's for the donors, but yet they trick we the people into thinking it's for the public purpose. Shake my head. Yeah, they're liars. They're consciously liars, trying to mislead us. Consciously. They consider that to be good politics. Holly Horn says, the mansion and cinema won. Oh, absolutely. And the American people lost. Absolutely. Barney Firestone said, Dems need to be taught how to win. Oh, honey, it's damn simple. They have to be taught how to say no. To say no frequently, to say no early, and to continue saying no until they get what they want.
My friend Josette knew how to turn people around.
She knew how to say no.
Yes.
And she knew how to walk away from the table. And Holly Horn says, do you think Pelosi twisted arms?
Of course she did.
She twisted everything she could get a hold of.
Sure.
And Michelle de Villiers says, much of the hearing loss is due to noise on the job. It probably is, Michelle, I agree. Carmen says it's just enough to appease the public to make them think the Dems finally did something. It's not just enough. They're going to get their clocks cleaned in 2022.
I still am at a loss as to how they can possibly not see how angry the American people are. I really am at a loss. Is it that much of an ivory tower that they just don't see outside?
Okay, I will tell you how they cannot see outside. Because even though the public opinion ratings of Congress have been abysmally low for years and years and years, most people continue to vote for their congresswoman or congressman. They just do it. They have this idea their congressperson is very nice and very good and has their interests at heart. Maybe because they've done some constituent service, or maybe because they're friendly at a public meeting, or for reasons, okay, of that sort. They're convinced Congress as a whole is terrible, but they're convinced their congressman, okay, is okay. What we have to get them to do is vote against their incumbent, even though they think their incumbent is a nice person.
Well,
and the only way to persuade them to do that is to point out that their congressman has been working within a system that screws them. and that the only way to change that system is to get rid of their congressman along with every other congressman so that the whole system can be brought down. And that it's unfortunate that their congressman is a nice person and friendly and might have done them a favor or two, but nevertheless, they have to go for the sake of fixing the system. That's what we have to start saying to people. Anyway, Carmen says it's just enough to appease the public to make them think the Dems finally did something. Pissed. And Sandy Derrick says Bernie and Menendez were on TV today. I guess Menendez is going to lose his seat like Sweeney did.
Well, it's about damn time. He's corrupt as hell.
He is a crook. He is definitely and utterly a crook. And totally bought by the pharmaceuticals, isn't he?
Well, yeah, but he's from Jersey, so that's expected. But he's literally a crook.
Yep. And he's been literally a crook for years. And by the way, his daughter has a pundit job. Holly Horn said, that's like, quote, but we got some give back on Paygo to look good. Yep, a little give back, okay, on Paygo.
What was that? What was the Paygo give back? What am I missing?
Okay, in the late fall of last year, the squad made a deal with Pelosi.
Oh, that certain things, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So they got a couple of things in return for helping to vote her in on January 3rd. And since then, she's been dumping on them and all the rest of the progressives. $15 an hour out, the PRO Act out, the $2,000 out, only $1,400 in. The dicking around for 6 months while Biden played bipartisan games with Manchin and Sinema. All of that could have been very, very different if Pelosi had been voted out on January 3rd and somebody more friendly to priorities of the progressives had been voted in. Carmen said, once again, no ponies for us, but corporations are playing polo with our lives on their high horses, mofo. Carmen, you got it. Everybody really likes that comment. And Lana says, I am running around. Please forgive if I missed a comment. That's fine, Lana. And Carmen says, hashtag general strike swarms. I completely agree. Carmen says, right, because incumbents have the corrupt connections to corporations. Overwhelmingly, incumbents have the connections to corporations. Now, of course, there are some people like the squad who don't have the connections to the corporations, and they would fall in a clean sweep too. However, this has to be governed by a simple rule if it's going to be effective. If the system is going to be disrupted, it has to be about the simple rule, who's ever an incumbent falls. Because by and large, 98% of the incumbents in Congress have corrupt connections to corporations. That's just the reality. Okay. And by the way, the 2% that don't are not as likely to fall because their constituents are not as likely to accept the idea that they have to clean house of those incumbents. So because of the way they've acted, it's probably true that the squad will have a better chance to survive than almost anybody else, such a clean sweep, if that gives you some comfort. But that shouldn't affect our behavior in our campaign. Our general rule has to be clean sweep, no exceptions, because that's the principle. And the principle has to be kept simple in order to be able to carry out this campaign at the very small expense that we're going to have to carry out this campaign. We're just not going to have a ton of money we can use to make exceptions.
Although it would be really nice to hit hard the fact that, you know, there's 6 of them that sit on the committees and they're pigeonholing all our legislation.
Yep.
One of them is sitting on Medicare for all. Another one is sitting on
Richie Neal.
Roe v. Wade.
Who's the one sitting on Roe v. Wade?
I'm not sure. I can't find. I don't know who's sitting on it.
it might be someone who's the chairperson. The chairperson of the Judiciary Committee is Jerry Nadler, isn't it?
Well, I'm thinking Nadler, but why would it be in the Judiciary Committee?
Because Roe v. Wade is about a very
Oh, it's a
important
decision.
law. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. So Nadler. So he's not my bestie friend.
Yeah, but he's always been on the surface very strongly for choice. On the surface.
Well, I think we're getting back to who tells who to bury what, right? We're back to the power structure. They get told to sit on something, and they do.
And they do sit on something. And even though he personally may be very much for choice, if Nancy Pelosi tells him to sit on it, he's going to sit on it. If Richie Neal tells him, well, if you pass it through your committee, it's still going to be pigeonholed in the Ways and Means Committee. So why bother with it, Jerry?
Why go against the power structure that's going to make your life hell? I mean, I think that it is very naive of people to think that these politicians don't catch hell from the power structure. They do. They do.
Yeah. So Steve Day says hashtag clean the House. And hashtag clean the Senate, too.
Yeah.
And Steve Day says, whose press conference? Carmen says, what's a good hashtag to vote out incumbents? Hashtag rotten cucumbers throw at incumbents with votes. Now, Carmen, that's an awfully complicated hashtag.
Yep.
And you simplify it a bit. Sandy Degg said we should hashtag clean their clocks as well. I'm all for cleaning their clocks. Clean the house and clean their clocks. And Sandy Degg says Bernie and Bobby Menendez. And Steve Day says, did we do Pelosi? Well,
do her how?
She is certainly the incumbent who will be most eligible for getting thrown out. Steve Day says, hashtag fight on all fronts, hashtag goes with posting any issue. Well, maybe. Sandy says, I don't think anyone wants to do Pelosi. L. Steve Day, says Sandy Degg.
Yeah, that's true.
And Carmen says, after all, they might get drowned in designer ice cream.
Oh, God. Or put in the freezer.
Put in the freezer, yeah. The Wicked Witch of the West is going to put them in the freezer. Carmen says, hashtag cancel incumbents. Steve Day says, no. Is Sandy thick? Oh, no, Steve. Cara Emanuel says, I don't know, Joe. I kind of like the old school way. Laugh out loud. What was the old school way, Cara? And Carmen says, Dr. Joe has the prescription for what ails democracy. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. Steve Day says, what old school does Cara like? And sorry for the interruption in the stream, but we are back now. But there definitely was an interruption in the screen that we could see on our screens here. Steve Day says strategy, not sarcasm. And Carmen says they've been negotiating with the enemy. They have. And they've been getting negotiated down because they don't know how to say no, don't know how to walk away from the table. Never learned how to walk away from the table. Why is that true? I suppose because, well, I know they're not all middle class. So I can't say it's because, they're all middle class. I don't know why it is.
Well, they have to follow the leader of the caucus, right? I mean,
no,
she's in that position for a reason.
They don't have to follow the head of the caucus. She can do very little to any individual except perhaps kick him out of the caucus. But what advantage is there for their constituents for them to be in this caucus. What did the Congressional Progressive Caucus do for the squad and their constituents on this occasion? As far
Nothing.
as I can see, they did nothing.
They haven't done anything for them all year.
They haven't done anything for them
I
all
mean,
year. So
listen.
why won't the squad just leave the caucus and create their own caucus? They're
Well,
supposed to have their own
because
caucus
they
to begin
need
with.
a budget, right? They need to be a sanctioned caucus to have any teeth. I think that's part of the problem, right?
Well, each of the Congress people gets a budget. That is not dependent on the caucus. Okay, the caucus gets a budget
Yeah.
itself, but that budget is not distributed among the members. It's used for caucus purposes.
Right, of course. But if you don't have a budget and you're not a sanctioned caucus, you can't do something like vacate the chair, right?
That's true, but you can't do something like vacate the chair anyway if the head of your caucus won't do vacate the chair.
Which is why we need to vote her out.
Yeah,
Right.
which is why we need to vote her out. But
In the Counterpunch article, Joe, they mentioned the fact that they're questioning why the CPC hasn't submitted representation to the DNC or something like that. And I didn't even know that they could do that.
yes, I didn't know they could do that, but it's a good question. Why haven't they insisted that as an official congressional caucus, they should have representation on the DNC?
And I mean, I think we have our answer, right? We know that they're not, I'm going to say this again, and I know people don't like this, but Jayapal is absolutely not going to go against Pelosi. She's hand delivered just about everything. The only real stunt that was pulled last week was her, they supposedly threw Nancy out of the meeting. They asked her to leave. But up until that point, they're girlfriends, man. They're blah, blah, blah. Everything's cool.
Yeah, I think they are. Just Calvin says stop voting for Dems and Republican, get open primaries. And ranked choice voting, says Just Calvin. Yeah, we agree on that here, Calvin.
Yeah, but we have to do something now. We don't have time.
We've got to do something, and we've got to do something more radical. And what we've been suggesting here is more radical. It will disrupt everything.
Right.
Of course, it all depends on how successful it is. But the point is, if we run it right, if we implement it right, if people catch the spirit of the thing, we could get rid of 200, 250, 300 House members. If that happens in November 22nd, you can bet your sweet Bippy that
You're freezing, Joe. Why are you
those
freezing?
people in Congress, they're going to look to the right of them, okay, and look to the rest of them, the left of them, and ask themselves, what's going to happen in 2024 if we don't straighten up?
Keep taking money or we're taking your seat. Something to that effect, right?
Keep taking money and we're going to take your seat. Even if we didn't get you the first time, we're going to get you the second time.
Yeah. Yeah, something to that effect. We have to tie the two together. People need to understand what the effort is.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if we couldn't get people to register to vote just because, for once, people would feel empowered.
Yes, and that might be enough to get people registered to vote. Steve Day says cleaning house is easy once decided to do that. And Michelle de Villiers says Rick Larson started as a lobbyist for the dental industry. Rick Larson is one of the Washington Congress people, right?
Yeah,
standing
I think so.
Way, right? Steve Day says, big, however, hashtag vote incumbents out. BIJ, however, I'm not sure what you mean there. Maybe basic income guarantee. That's what the big often is. However, I favor something called the JIG, which is the job with a basic income guarantee. The job guarantee with a basic income guarantee. Elizabeth Harding says, yeah, baby, been voting in Republican primaries for a while. Carmen says, if any politician has ever taken corporate donations, they need to be voted out. They have been compromised. Right. But you can't expect people to know about that. So the safe thing is ask them to just get rid of their incumbents, because their incumbents are part of the system. And we need to disrupt this system because it hasn't been serving them. And the results are very clear that it hasn't been serving them. Sandy Deck says, they need us to get them elected. They have to be reprogrammed to remember they work for us. Without us, they don't get what they want before we get what we want. That's an important point, because voting that many people out is one of the most powerful things we could do to reprogram them to remember they work for us. If they see 2/3 of them gone, when in other elections, at most, it's been 5% or 4% or 3%, they suddenly see 67% of their colleagues gone.
Even 30 would do it, Joe. 30% would do it. We don't have to take out half of them. We just need to take out 30%. And if you take the leadership out, that'll scare the crap out of them.
We won't get to 30% if we do not aim for the 100%.
Yeah, there is that. I agree. But I'm just trying to be realistic here, because we have a closed circuit for the moment. We can make a really big difference here.
Yeah, we can make a really big difference, but we can't stop aiming at the 100%, because if we start aiming at the 30%, we won't get even the 30%.
Well, how do you aim at that? You just have to tell people. But what I'm trying to come away with here is that if we could accomplish that, right, and then do it again 2 years later, right, we will have changed things.
We will have reprogrammed them to remember who they work for.
Every time they go to a town hall, you know how much money they're taking, you know what they've done, what their positions have been, you call them out. Because what we've got right now are these huge bills. Nobody sees these votes. They do them on Friday night at 1:00 in the morning on purpose. They do this crap on purpose.
Right. So you won't be watching.
And it's not in the news cycles. Nobody's paid any attention.
Yes, and they did it also in the way they did it by using the bill that was passed in the House earlier, so that no one could say that a particular congressman had voted for the infrastructure bill.
Right. They voted for an amendment. Yep. That's it.
So they do any little thing they can to muddy the water in terms of being able to catch them dead to rights in an ad. That's what they're looking at. They're looking at the ad wars, and they're looking at not really what public opinion thinks, but they're looking at how they can manipulate public opinion to fool people. That's why we have to vote on the basis of the results they're collectively producing. The results they're collectively producing are for the donors, are not for us. That's why we have to vote against all the incumbents to destroy their system. Ghostot says the Federal Appeals Court has temporarily halted the Biden administration's COVID-19 vaccine requirement for businesses with 100 or more workers. That was probably predictable. Steve Day says them doesn't work for us when we vote incumbents out. And Steve says them lose their job working on our dime when we vote incumbents out. And Steve Gonzo says a diary allegedly belonging to Ashley Biden was published this week, and among its entries were accusations of her being molested during showers with Joe Biden that she felt were probably not appropriate.
What?
What? Who is that?
I don't know quite who Ashley Biden is. I don't know if that's one of his daughters. I'm not, that familiar with his family.
Was she a little kid or?
It doesn't say. Okay, a diary allegedly belonging to Ashley Biden. We don't even know if there's, anything legitimate in that.
I don't even know who that is.
At all. Yeah. And Carmen says the Maserati protesters is a beautiful thing. I guess there are protesters at the Maserati plant. Is that in Italy, Carmen?
No. Joe Biden or what's his name? Manchin actually drives a Maserati. He was coming out of a parking garage, and there were a bunch of people protesting him, and he actually had to back the Maserati up. It was beautiful.
Oh, cool. He has a yacht and he has a Maserati. He's actually spending too much money. I mean, allegedly, he's worth only $7 million. I think that's not enough to afford a yacht and a Maserati.
Whatever.
He's not fiscally responsible, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Sandy says, I am so bad with acronyms. Evelina says, me too. They're supposed to be an easy way to remember things, but they're not. LOL. God, I'm having trouble remembering that LOL. No, I'm sorry. I know it's laugh out loud. Kay says, politics has become never ending and very depressing. Sandy then said she needed a central place, and Lisa responded to that. We also need to go into the groups to like the articles and comments to drive the algorithms.
Yeah, maybe we can do something else. I don't know. I'm going to noodle on this. I'll ask, what do you call it? Shane, and see if we can come up with something where we can drop articles so everybody can access them without it having, I worry about who's, I just don't want people coming in and, wreaking havoc in there. There might be something better than a Slack.
Good. Tina Pacia says, great idea. I'm not familiar with Slack, but would the info be searchable by state?
Don't know. Depends on how we organize it.
Carmen says, the oligarchs stick together. All else is theater. Sandy says, Slack is kind of like an online office where you go and just pick up information and share it or leave ideas. Yes, it is. And Kay says, that is Biden's daughter. Ooh. I was afraid that might be Biden's daughter. I scrolled down too fast, so I have to get back to where I was. That's why I'm being a little quiet here. There are so many comments here. Here it is. Ghost says, have you noticed many world leaders are parroting the BBBS? No, I haven't noticed that.
In what way?
Yeah, that's interesting. In what way are they doing something so silly? Sandy Degg says we could probably do Zoom as well. Yes, we could do Zoom. I have a personal Zoom. Shane has a personal Zoom.
I've got one too.
So also Lisa has a personal Zoom. So a number of us have personal Zooms. Sandy says, yes, I think so, Kay. It's been a while since I have been on Slack. BL says, where's the link? Are you talking about the link to Slack? We don't have the Slack set up yet, BL.
He was talking about the Counterpunch and Common Dreams articles, I think.
Okay, the Common Dreams article. What did I do?
You can't post links in the YouTube chat. Can you do links in Facebook at all? I don't know. I don't know how to get the links to anybody.
Yeah, you can post links in the Facebook video. That is quite common. And I'm going to post the Common Dreams link right here now in his comment. So
Yeah, you can do it because you've got control, right?
You could probably post links in the comments too, can't you?
No, I can't.
No.
At
Okay.
least I don't know how.
Okay, Michelle de Villiers says, has to stop being about elevating people to untouchable status. It has to be about policy. No one person, okay, is indispensable. That certainly includes Joe Biden. Sandy says, I think I shared this today. BL says hello. Sandy says, along with some massage articles. Carmen says, great statement, Michelle. Holly Horn says, exactly, Michelle. Shane was asking earlier if once the bill goes to the Senate, if anyone could block it. If so, do we think they might do it? It's not going to the Senate, Lana. What the effect of the maneuver by Pelosi was to amend a bill that had already passed the House, an amendment by putting in the Senate language. So once they passed but that particular amendment in the Senate, in the House, by concurring with the amendment, and once they did that, then the Senate bill had passed the House officially. All Nancy Pelosi had to do was to send the Senate bill that had been passed in the House directly to the president. There was no reason why it had to go back to the Senate.
Yeah, so they made the amendment to swap the language. They voted positively on that. Then they had a vote to concur. And that's when I was texting you last night, Joe. I'm like, what the hell is going on? I don't understand what they're doing.
Yeah, but there was no vote on the
There's
amendment.
no vote on the infrastructure bill. There was an amendment, and then there was a vote to concur on the previous question or whatever. However it's worded, you'll never, it was so like, oh my God, I don't even know what's going on.
Right. So Lisa says, can you see my link posts? And Holly Horn says, no, Lisa, no links. I don't see any links in the chat. Okay, I can amend the description and put some links there, but I've already put a link in the chat now. I can put the other link to Michael Hudson's article from Counterpunch as well. But I have to recapture that article. It's in my other browser, is basically the point. I can't reach it from Chrome. I'm here in Chrome. Lisa says, there's no way to kill the infrastructure bill. It's passed. But you know where I can reach that link?
Mm-hmm.
I can reach that link in Twitter because Lisa was kind enough to send it to me earlier today.
Oh, yeah, I did.
So it's in Twitter. I just have to scroll up and pick it up here. If I can go up high enough. Where is Counterpunch? HR 3684. We sent so much to each other today that I can't easily find that link. But
I can send it again, Joe. Hold on. I'll just send it to you. It's up. It's up at the. I gotta go. I'll get it. Hold on. Sorry.
That's okay. If you send it to me again, I can post it in the chat.
Here it comes.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay. Yeah, this is the end. Okay, copy link address. Going into StreamYard. Oh, that's the link to the Twitter link, but they can probably still get it through that. If you click on this link, it should get you to the Counterpunch article. Okay. So there's no way to kill the infrastructure bill anymore. It has just passed. Steve, it's just like that. It's okay to protest Mansion. Laugh out loud. Sure. Holly says, yeah. Dr. Joe. Sandy says, I got a strange friend request while searching for articles from someone that is in the military. He loved my profile picture. I have a beautiful smile and wanted me to friend him. My profile is, as you can see, Julian. Laugh out loud. Needless to say, he's not on my friend list. And Michelle de Villiers says they had, quote, permission, unquote, to vote no. Holly Horn says Nancy Pelosi's permission. Holly Horn says rotating villains. Holly Horn says row con man. Michelle says, I like your bloodless revolution plan, Joe. Thank you, Michelle. Carmen says, strike my comment about Ilhan earlier. You're right, Joe. They only held out to make it look like they were fighting for progressives after they had already surrendered. Well, I'm not sure.
No, I mean, I'm gonna push back on this. I think that the progressives, the 6 of them, who voted no and who were very public on interviews and in their tweets, are just powerless, but they held out. They didn't cave. I'm not a fraud squad person. I don't like that kind of stuff. What we would love is to have all kinds of politicians up there who don't take lobbying money, right? And you know what, guys? The truth of it is that the day may come, not so far down the road, where they start taking it. But for the moment, they are not. And that's one of the reasons why I'm, hopeful that we can turning over the Congress. New people coming in are more likely to be willing to serve their constituents, as opposed to after they're in there for a while and they start realizing that this is how everybody up on the Hill plays the game and blah, blah, blah. They fall in line, right?
Right. Okay. And also, Carmen, though I speculated that they only did what they did simply because it was okay with Pelosi. She didn't have to put any pressure on them because she had already won. It's also true that they did not cave.
Yeah,
they voted no on that particular bill. And the other 20 to 23 who were supposedly left that afternoon, the other 17 of them did cave because they changed sides and they did vote for the bill. And that's a difference. It's a difference. It's not a difference that actually made a difference on this occasion. But
BL just posted a comment that it's almost like you want them to take lobbyist money. Of course we don't. Were you here the whole time? We're talking about voting them out specifically because they're taking corporate money, lobbyist money. And anybody can get corrupt. That is true. I think the point herein is the longer that they're in, the more opportunity they have to be corrupted in that regard.
Yeah, Holly Horn says, remember the 6th of November. Yeah, that's the dog. Holly Horn says, although the actual line is the 5th of November. Yes, it is the 5th of November is Guy Fawkes Day.
What is Guy Fawkes?
Well, what Guy Fawkes tried to do on the 5th of November was to overthrow the Parliament, in England.
Okay.
He attempted a revolution on the 5th of November, and that's become a holiday in England, I believe, or at least some kind of celebration day. But also, it was very central to the movie V for Vendetta, if you ever saw that movie. Did you ever see that movie?
Yes.
Okay, so that was about Guy Fawkes Day.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
Okay.
that was the model for what the V was trying to do. And Elvira Mahalko says, get rid of Pelosi, hashtag vacate the chair. Also, get rid of that corrupt Chantel Brown. We need to get Nina Turner in, of course. And V for vote their asses out, says Carmen Munez.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And BL says, hey now, hey. Holly Horn says, and a late hello to Dr. Joe and Lisa. And a late hello to you, Holly Horn. You missed our proposal. You have to go back and see the video and watch that. We have a dynamite proposal for changing things. Elvira Mahaka says, I think Jayapal is sincere but naive in believing she's able to negotiate with liars who will run against her. Any takers, we need a challenge. Now we need to challenge her. I don't see why you say she's naive. I mean, she seemed to negotiate successfully when she was in the legislature in Washington, right? She had an impressive record there.
Yeah, I'm not giving Jayapal any naivete.
And
I've followed her too close for as long as she's been there.
Yeah, and Lisa says, hello, Holly. Ghost Start says, Nancy Pelosi called Jayapal's mother in India. I thought it was Joe Biden.
Joe Biden called
Her mother. And Holly Horn says, precisely, Dr. Joe. Carmen says, boomer mentality. They're suckers for charisma and niceties. It's why we're paying in hell flames. K. Ron says, who's NP Ghost Start? I think that's Nancy Pelosi. And Senny says the first rule of the political fight club is clean sweep. Sandy Deck says Chili Willy. And Lana says hashtag throw the bums out. Holly Horn greets Lana. And Carmen says piloting isn't running again, right? So the goal is still hashtag vacate the chair. Well, the immediate goal, if we could get it, is vacate the chair. The problem is
Jayapal would have to call for it, right? She'd have to move on it.
exactly.
She's not gonna.
Yes, Jayapal is standing in the way. Carmen said, would it be wise to spread a hashtag to vote out incumbents, or would Dems join with the fascists to sabotage the vote even more? Because they will become vicious. I don't know. I mean, I think we have to have a social media campaign to vote out all incumbents in order to disrupt the Congress and destroy the internal system they have in the House and the Senate, which both have rules and traditions and procedures that thwart democracy and make people in there unable to represent us. So this is about destroying systems in those two houses, okay, that are anti-democratic. It's true the Dems are going to join with the fascists to sabotage the vote even more. It's true the Dems are trying to distort what we say, and they're going to become vicious. And
They're going to become vicious anyway. They always do.
They always do. But they're going to become vicious anyway, and particularly vicious when they get scared if we're starting to have success. But we're just going to have to face that and keep up with it. And if we can have any measure of success, we really are going to change that system. And Kay says that is Biden's daughter. Ashley Biden is Biden's daughter. So Biden's daughter, oh, I see. Biden's daughter was writing that in a diary. There's supposedly a diary.
Yeah. I didn't see any of this.
Supposedly.
I don't know where this is coming from. I have to look.
Yeah. I think there are all kinds of people with incentives to manufacture a diary of that kind, and I think we have to be appropriately skeptical. Carmen says Delta Plus is spreading, and the courts are holding vaccine mandates. Disaster after disaster. Molly has Carmen. It's awful. Sandy asks about the messenger. Kay says Biden family are corrupt too. Hardly any that are not. BL says, sorry, I forgot I had to take care of something. And I left the Common Dreams link. And Carmen says, I think you can post links, but I've heard someone say they disappear later. Links that are left in the top chat are going to disappear later unless the top chat, okay, is frozen in place for a particular stream. But if the links are put into the description, they do not disappear later. They stay forever. So I could put the links into the description too.
That'd be cool.
So, because I can edit the description after the stream is over. That's not a problem. So Ghost Up said, Joe's link is clickable. Otherwise, you can copy paste. And Kay says, Ghost Start, she is definitely corrupt. Tina Pacia says he definitely needs to go. A lot of his power has been siphoned away by Sweeney's loss. Sandy Degg says, Common Dream. Oh, I see. She leaves the link to Common Dreams herself. Thank you, Sandy. And I left the link to Michael Hudson's article. And Steve Gonzo, or Ghost Start, says, Vanguard and BlackRock top every major corporation's investor list, from big pharma to media to real estate to MIC, Raytheon, Boeing, including politicians' portfolios, right? And Ghost Start says Pfizer Vanguard Group Incorporated 456,203,630 shares, June 29th.
I read that, but I can't remember where I read it at. I read that today.
And Elvira says, you raise good points, but I do have to say I give lots of credit to progressives who did vote no. They've been approached by lobbyists and have not been corrupted. They are still grassroots. They may still be grassroots, but when we counted on them to say no, when those bills were getting cut, they did not come out and say. For example, when people were talking about 6.5 trillion, they did not come out and say at that point, if it's less than 6.5 trillion, we're not going to vote for it. They have to draw specific lines and early. But the whole negotiating tactic, okay, of the progressives, as David Sirota has pointed out, okay, again and again, he's very correct. They did not specify any red lines that other people could not cross if they wanted their support. They kept everything vague so they could be flexible. That was the argument that was given to them. So we can be flexible and decide what to do when we meet with unpredictable conditions. We shouldn't be drawing red lines. That's what they're told to do, and that's what they did, and that's why it was so easy to get around them, because nothing the corporatists did would stimulate them to say, no, I'm not voting for a proposal like this. Nina says, boy, that use of the former bill was a real bait and switch move. Ticks me off. Oh, she did that before. She did that with the TPP stuff before also. I should have been expecting that. I know her. I know how she pulls these moves. She's very good at it. Very, very good. BL says, it's almost like you want them to take the lobbyist money. Any party can get corrupted, even third parties. Be realistic. At this point, we can't be realistic because you know what? We've been being realistic all the time, and it hasn't been working for us. We have to do something now that is not so realistic, but if it works, will change the system.
The rules aren't working. I think that's what we're all starting to realize.
The structure is not working.
Yeah.
What would
Yeah.
you like it to look like? What do you want it to look like?
Oh, I know what I want it to look like. I want the rules to be set up in such a way that the backbenchers in Congress have real power. So, for example, a favorite rule of mine is if a bill gets 20 co-sponsors in the House, okay, of Representatives, it automatically gets a floor vote within 5 business days.
Great idea.
That's it. Okay, that's one of my rules. Okay, a second rule is, of course, get rid of pay go, no pay go. In the Senate, I get rid of rule whatever number it is that lets the filibuster go on. Get rid of that, okay, immediately. Okay, but get rid of seniority. In other words, let people be elected to committee chair positions.
Yeah, this whole having to buy into the committee.
Yep, get rid of the rule that forces people to buy into committees by paying dues to the DCCC. So basically, the progressives, okay, are in the position of having to give contributions to the DCCC, of a certain amount of money, and the DCCC turns around and uses that money to support the centrists who are going to run against the progressives. That kind of stuff has got to stop. That kind of rule has to be swept away in Congress. Gostart says the 6 no votes were meaningless kabuki. Nancy Pelosi knew she had the votes that allowed them to save face to keep up the farce. Yeah, I kind of agree with that, Gostart. Okay, in any case, it is not clear that they were tested. They did take those votes. It isn't clear that they were difficult votes. That's what I think we're saying.
Yeah, I don't see Nancy giving the squad any favors in all of this. I just don't.
Yeah, but she might have felt that it was not worth it to try to force them to give a yes vote when she did not need their vote. She'd gotten all the others to cave. So, if she sat on them for this vote, it might have hardened any opposition they might have to her on January 3rd of 2023 in case she decides to try again. So maybe she doesn't want to give people too many reasons to hold any grudges.
Yeah.
Though I don't see, okay, how AOC could ever vote for her again for anything after the humiliation that she subjected AOC to on the floor, okay, a few weeks ago. I'm telling you, if I was AOC, if she tried to do that to me and I was a congressperson, I would absolutely have cut her off at the knees in front of everybody right out in public. Anyway, Gostart says, Gostart says that that there's someone by the name of Anonymous has a Million Man March every November 5th. Okay, I don't think a Million Man March is enough anymore. I think there's got to be a 10 million person march before the mainstream news people will pay any attention.
Well, they're doing a really good job of ignoring everything that's going on in Europe. There's millions of people in the streets. They're not paying any attention.
Right.
Now,
Absolutely. But if it were here in Washington and we had 10 million people on the streets here in Washington,
well, they would have to cover that.
I think the Washington Post would pay attention. Lana says, I think we should give credit where credit is due. If you're going to bitch at the squad for not having a spine, give credit when they do. Otherwise, just being negative Nellies. Well, yeah, I think that's right. But the point also is that in making the 6 no votes, okay, at the point when that happened, it may not have been a difficult vote for them to take because the outcome was, actually already determined. I do give them some credit. I think they wanted to vote no, and I think they wanted to keep on voting no. Sandy says,
I think they thought that they were going to defeat this bill until Nancy called them all back in and, appealed to the centrists. And God only knows what it took an hour and a half.
yeah. And Sandy says, oh, stop with the boomer BS. Sandy says we need to unite, not name call each other. And Solana hates the clock, says I'll vote present on that. It says go start. Elvira Mahako says true justice would be Hillary and Bill Clinton in prison. Carmen says, so viciousness it is, vote him out. Steve says, we know there is no pleasing you. Alana said to Steve, we know there is no pleasing you. And Carmen says, how convenient, okay, that the diary just now got revealed. And Michelle de Villiers says, banana foster bread pudding, homemade oatmeal, honey bread, ready now. Viva la revolution.
Ooh, that sounds yummy.
Yeah, bananas Foster. Yeah, that does sound yummy. Carmen Muniz says the program has been corrupted. Delete. And Steve says, you got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, and know when to run. You never count your money when you're sitting at the table. There'll be time enough for counting. When the game is done? Is that the story? I don't know. And Michelle de Villiers says, Silver Fox. Carmen says, have you all seen that corporations front like they are for voting rights, but we're donating to the GOP still? Yes, of course, we've all noticed that. I hope we've all noticed that. Secret to surviving is knowing what to throw away and knowing what to keep, because every hand's a winner and every hand's a loser. And the best you can hope for is to die in your sleep. #gamble. BL Watt is someone baking. And Michelle de Villiers says, eternally. And Carmen says, Schmancy promised them ice cream. And Steve Gonzo says, when the deal is done. Indeed. Well, we've come to the end of the comments. To repeat the simple proposal. The simple proposal is when November 2022 rolls around, vote out the incumbents in your districts at the state level, at the local level, at the federal level. It's a very simple rule. No matter who the incumbent is, vote them out. Vote for their opposition. Clean house. Clean their clocks. Clean the Congress. Destroy their rules. Destroy their power structure. Then that system will change for a while. Now, we don't know what will happen when a new system reestablishes itself. But the possibility for change will be there. And meanwhile, we'll be carrying on other campaigns and pressuring for other things and shaping the political climate so that the new system that comes into being is likely to be much more favorable to us. We're not saying this is the only thing you do. We're saying you do this thing and you also support every protest that's for good purposes, every demonstration that's for good purposes. If it's a demonstration against Pfizer, fine. It's a demonstration for Julian Assange, okay, or for Donziger, fine. Okay, if it's a demonstration for Medicare for all, fine. If it's a protest to lay the blame for 68,000 fatalities per year at Nancy Pelosi's door, fine. These were all great protests that we have been engaged in and that we're intending to be engaged in. Support them all.
Don't forget about the strikes, the labor strikes. It's a great opportunity to go talk to labor on the picket lines as activists They're out there all day long, can do all that kind of stuff. I mean, we really need to network.
Do all that stuff, build that network, and use that network to support the idea of kicking all the incumbents out come November of 2022. That proposal is just part of this general protest movement to disrupt the system and get real political change. So that's our message for tonight. And we will see you again on Tuesday when our guest will be Ramona Masacci.
That's right. Ramona's coming. And don't forget, Knit the Revolution happens 5 o'clock on Mondays, 5 o'clock
Yes,
Eastern Standard Time.
yes, indeed. And also the Knit the Revolution show, okay, is the show where by Laura Fielding, Executive Director of the Red Berets for Medicare for All, is hosting, and Lisa will be co-hosting. And that is a great show. The first installment was great.
Yes, and we'll have Sharif on this Monday. Sharif Snuggs.
Right, and that's going to be terrific because Sharif Snuggs is something else, as you'll see when you go and watch that show. It's going to be a terrific show. Okay, and by the way, as long as we're talking about Sharif, when the Pfizer protest happens and is live streamed, I will be doing the commentary for the live stream. So, just to advertise that. Okay, this the protest at Pfizer is going to be November 15th.
Yes.
Okay, so keep that in mind. It's going to be in the morning. I'm going to have to get up early to do that. And you know that's a great sacrifice for me. Carmen says, yep, Lisa, I've been babysitting for free to help a young lady so she can go to her union meetings.
Nice.
Hey,
That's it. That's what we got to do. There's another 80,000 hitting next week. And I can't remember I can't remember what union. I'm sorry, but there's another 80,000 that are, it might be Kaiser.
I'm sorry, it might be Kaiser.
It might be. It might be.
The protest on the 15th is against Pfizer.
No. I'm talking about the strikes. Kaiser there's another.
Oh, you mean the
80,000.
Pfizer strike on the West Coast?
I'm pretty sure it was Kaiser. Anyhow, I'm in a DM room where we just push all the new strike information and the strike news, and it's amazing what's going on. I mean, there's strikes all over, and the opportunities to hit those picket lines and talk to those folks is great. If we could get labor into this movement, we'd be unstoppable.
Yeah.
Okay, so Sandy says, if you want articles, just let me know what kind. Well, we'd love articles concerning labor strikes. We'd love articles on Assange.
Yeah.
Those would be very, very good. Okay, at this point, we're really looking at those. We would love articles also on how Pfizer and Kaiser and the powers that be in the Medicare for All area on how they've been corrupting the political system. Those are tremendously important articles too. So those are a good place to start, Sandy. That would be wonderful if you could do that for us. And we will get that into the Slack, okay, or whatever repository we decide is appropriate.
Yeah. If anybody wants to, I don't know. I mean, I'll work on that. I don't know who Sandy Degg is. Does anybody know?
Yes, I do.
What's
Sandy
the
DeGeorge. But Sandy DeGeorge. But she used to be with RP. She's been following things here, for a very long time. She's a friend of this show. And
Does she have a Twitter at?
Have you got a Twitter account, Sandy? Her name is Sandra DeGeorge.
Okay.
Be more formal about it.
I'll find her. I'm sure somebody knows how to find her.
Yeah, it would be Lana.
Okay,
who knows how
Lana.
to find her. Okay, and we have her New Jersey address also.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'll get Lana and I touch base pretty frequent. I can talk to Lana. And then maybe we could work together, Sandy, on a repository, whatever makes the most sense.
Okay.
Because it stinks when you get dumped into a repository that you don't know how to use. If we're talking about articles, it might be even better to just do it on a Google Drive or something. Anyhow, we'll figure it out.
Okay, so we got current interventions from Johnny Axum, who said, wouldn't it be great if these unions were fighting for the workers to take over and own the companies? By the way, we'll see you tomorrow at 5 o'clock, I believe, Johnny Axum. And we'll see Shane then, too.
That's right. Yes, tomorrow.
And Lisa will be there, too, and we can talk to Shane about all this stuff.
Yes.
And
When?
Ghostlet says, Johnny Axum be goods in the house at 5 p.m. tomorrow. We have the company meeting at that point.
Yeah.
Johnny Axum says, I'm trying to convince people that is what the purpose of a private sector union should be. I hope you succeed, Johnny, because that would be a great thing if our private sector unions could get that done. Johnny says, this begging for scraps while these companies post record profits in the billions needs to end. Absolutely. Sandy says, I do, but I never use it. Okay. And Ghostart says, labor pack. And so I've come to the end of the comments, and I think that's going to be it for tonight.
Good night,
But as I
Kay.
said, we will see you on Tuesday. Good
night,
night,
everybody.
Kay. And we love you, Kay, and we're so happy that you've come to YouTube so we can see you and we can see your comments and we can converse. So good night, all.
Good night, guys.
Good
Thanks
night.
for coming. Thanks for listening.
And have a
Thanks,
great
Joe.
day.